WNYC-TV presents About the Arts with Barbara Lee Diamonstein.
Welcome to About the Arts. I'm Barbara Lee Diamonstein, and our guest today is Estelle Parsons, who, after the usual theatrical struggles, skyrocketed to celebrity in the landmark movie, her first, Bonnie and Clyde, for which she won the Academy Award. She was nominated for a second Academy Award for her second film role in Rachel, Rachel. Estelle Parsons has been in numerous productions, including the Threepenny Opera, Mahagoni, and recently she appeared in Israel Horowitz's The Reason We Eat. She's been a singer, a law student, and even a writer and a commentator for The Today Show. We're especially pleased to have you here today, and a warm welcome to you, Estelle.
Thank you.
Of all the varied things you've done, what's given you the greatest pleasure?
Well, my children, I would have to say. I mean, meaningful pleasure, really, just day by day. Bringing up my children's the greatest thing of my life. No, I mean, it isn't the greatest thing, really, in terms of some sort of objective standards, but I would have to say it's given me the greatest pleasure, having my children around. Funny for me to say that, because I always think of myself as being so married to my work. But nothing really, means so much.
And professionally, and as an actress, singer?
Well, Bonnie and Clyde was the best experience. I've had two experiences with Arthur Penn, which kind of brought my whole... I forgot what the question was, actually. It wasn't meaningful at all. What brought me the most pleasure? What brought me the least pleasure, I have to go from that angle, because I was acting all these years, really all my life, starting in a little theater group when I was a kid, and then I gave it up and went to school. I mean, continued my education with the idea to be something different when I grew up, probably go into politics or be a lawyer. And then I realized I loved to act and went back to acting, and then always I would have trouble with the director. I would have all these questions in my mind about what it was all about, really. And then I did a production of The Skin of Our Teeth for Arthur Penn up at the Berkshire Drama Festival in Stockbridge, a festival season which actually is known internationally much more than it was ever known here. When I was in other countries, people would say, "You were at that initial season with the Berkshire Drama Festival." And
what was so unusual about that particular company?
Well, there was myself, Annie Bancroft, Frank Langella, Dustin Hoffman, Gene Hackman, Murray Shiskel, George Tabori, Arthur Penn, Bill Gibson. I mean, just for starters, you don't get a group of people like that together, in one place to really put forth a season, which was only a summer, actually, but we did, 3 or 4 things. We did The Merchant of Venice set in a concentration camp, which had actually been done during that war in the 40s, the Second World War. We did Skin of Our Teeth experimentally with Arthur Penn, Annie Bancroft and myself, and Alvin Epstein, who is now taking over the Tyrone Guthrie Theater in Minneapolis, and Frank Langella.
And it was there that Arthur Penn was the director?
He directed that. He and Vivica Lindfors and Alvin Epstein set up the season, but Arthur and Bill Gibson became a part of it. They're in the Stockbridge community. And he directed this first thing, free to do whatever he wanted. Well, out of that, I got all the answers to all the things that had ever perplexed me as an actress, and I became so depressed, because I no longer had any motivation to continue, because I'd found all the answers in that kind of work. So consequently, I then went on and did Bonnie and Clyde for him.
Was it Arthur Penn who invited you to do it?
Yes,
how did that all come about?
Well, at that time, when I was working for him up there, he said, "I have a script I'd like you to look at." And that was Bonnie and Clyde, and I didn't have any interest in movies up until that time. And I read it and thought it was a very good role for a secondary role. It had much more dimension than most secondary roles. And I really did it because Arthur was directing it, and I loved working for him so much, where everything had come to fruition. But after that, I had a very hard time, because I didn't need to act the way I had needed to act until that
what was
very
the
time.
catalyst?
Well, it's a way of working that we've subsequently gone on with Arthur, and myself working for Arthur in this experimental way. It's perhaps going to be a new methodology for actors working in a group situation with a text.
Can you describe that?
He describes it. I'm not so good at it. It's really the Stanislavski method, but applied to a group situation. Very simplistically put, the words of certain texts are only the frosting. And what you really have to find out is how the playwright arrived at the frosting. In other words, how these words are going to come out of this particular character. Now, some styles don't require that. Some styles you can start with the text and find the inner from the text. But there are certain great texts that require that the character be much more than a character, that it be a life force expressing certain things. And we have done some of the work at the Actors Studio, and we're going to continue it hopefully for the public this season, though it's nothing I can speak of any more specifically than to say that when we're ready to do it for people to come and see and enjoy or have the experience, then we're going to open it to the public.
How would you compare that with what the rest of us associate with as traditional actor studio methods?
Well, actor studio methods are they're for the actor. It's a way of working for an actor in the regular, so to say, commercial or text situation where each actor does his own work, and then you come together with a director who tells you where to stand and sometimes how to say a certain line so that it will fit with the other lines people are saying. It's quite a superficial way of working, which is very valid in an awful lot of situations. There are just some situations which require a lot more, and they haven't been dealt with in theatrical history. This kind of text that really requires another way of working. There has been actually in theatrical history not that much work done on what texts require. It's more how much time do the people have, and we'll throw it all together. Now, that doesn't always come out with profitable results. You can maybe do opera that way because you do have a very firm structure. But play scripts are not always very firm structures because they don't have music. In other words, the group that's doing it has to fill in everything that a composer, and a lyricist give in an opera. In a play, that has to all be done by the group, starting from nowhere. Of course, in ballet, they have the ballet, they have the music, they have the whole stylized thing, and even people who all know how to lift their left leg the same way. In the theater, you have as many styles come together, individual styles, as you have actors, unless you have an ensemble that's worked together for years, like, with a structure all their own. But there's no, so to say, style like ballet or music, opera with notes. Am I very coherent or
I think I understand what you mean. Did you have an artistic or a philosophical mentor? With whom did you study?
No. I worked in, so to say, a semi-professional theater. So I was just trained sort of technically. And then I started to work with Lee Strasberg. I tried all the teachers in all the schools everywhere as I was growing up in New York and in New England, but in college, but I never wanted anyone to touch my work. And then I met Lee, and I went to meet with him and took one look at him and cried for 20 minutes. I'm not a crying type, So then he took me to work with him, and I studied with him 5 years. He maybe has had a big effect on me, but maybe his genius also resides in the fact that he observes what you do. He brings out the artist in you, brings out the individuality in you, doesn't impose on you, this is the way one acts, this is the choice one should make. That's what's so difficult in, I think, all the arts. People who say this is what's right and wrong, because you have to really go with yourself. So in working with Lee, and then in working with Lee as an actress, and then working with Arthur in an actual professional and, so to say, commercial theater operation, where you have to please public who've paid for you. I mean, not commercial by that, where you feel a responsibility to them. Then I really found all this.
Well, by your own and by other persons' admissions, you're a great observer. What have you learned about life and about people in the theater? You're also a great philosopher, I suspect. That's what you'd prefer to spend your life doing.
Everything, yes, I did think about that a lot, but I think, too, if I really wanted to be a philosopher, I suppose I would have found a way to be one, as I did find a way to be an actress, you know. I haven't learned anything from observing people except to observe them, I think. And whatever I've learned from them goes into my work and is expressed that way. You know, I don't have it consciously formulated and can't really articulate it as a philosophy. I think what has to happen with an actress is constant change. It's too bad, because always here a parent should be consistent, and the only thing I'm consistent in, and I know it, is to be inconsistent. Whatever anyone says is going to change what it was the minute before. You know, it's the nature of an actor to be in the work always open, you know? And it certainly invades the real life of this actress, so that I can't have a philosophy. I have to not have one.
If I understand what you're saying, you said that all that you've observed and absorbed goes into your life as an actress. Does that mean that you see a difference between being an actress and being a person?
Oh, yes. It's a profession and an occupation with all of the hazards, and it gets in the way of one's development as a person. I used to think that I wanted more than anything to be a fully developed human being, and I've discovered that it's not possible to have that as a goal.
What is your goal now?
That there are well, I don't have a goal anymore so much in terms of looking forward to something. I think I would just like to always do meaningful work. Always work on great texts, you know, always have a challenge, and not to do ever anything I can do already. But I've always been that way.
Is there the work of a particular actor to whose work you particularly respond?
The only actor I've ever been interested in seeing was Marlon Brando, and I find I go to everything that he is in.
Well, that must mean movies.
I feel that way. Yes, all he does is movies. And I do manage to see them all, and I know some of them are really terrible, but over the years I always manage to see whatever he does for the public.
Bonnie and Clyde was your first movie, and you made reference to it earlier. Are you still interested in films?
No. I wasn't then. I was interested in working with Arthur. I'm not interested in films at all. I'm interested in the stage, both as an actress and, I think, as an actress and a director, maybe.
Do you include that in your own future direction?
Oh, yes. Because I have visions of how I want things to be in the theater. And when I go to the theater and I'm never content with what I see, I know I'm not just a malcontent. And I know that if I'm not content with it, I should really create what will content me, or try to, you know.
And what form do those visions take?
Well, I would like to there are several great texts that I would like to
for example,
act and direct, and there are some not so great ones too, but they're probably all pretty classical. Medea I'm very interested in. I've always been very interested in Antigone. I'm interested in all the Greek drama and how really to make it a contemporary theatrical experience. I've done, for myself, my most interesting work is always done at the Actors Studio.
What is the role that interests you the most that you've already performed?
That I've already performed? They don't interest me once I've performed them.
Well, you do some of them over again.
I don't have a... Oh, Brecht. Yeah. But that's probably a lot because of the music. But I love Three Penny Opera.
You started out as a singer. Wasn't your Broadway debut almost 20 years ago as a
I did.
singer?
I started with Ethel Merman and Happy Hunting, and before that I sang with bands and sang and played the piano in cocktail lounges and sang with bands. Can't call them orchestras now. I can't. Swing bands, dance bands, or whatever you call it.
You once told me who one of your musical partners were at a very early age.
Jack Lemmon. I've had some terrific ones. Jack Lemmon. Well, we grew up together. I think he's really responsible for what I always knew I wanted to act, but the whole musical part of my desires, I think, really came from him because he played the piano and sang and wrote music. And
was this at his undergraduate Harvard days?
Well, yeah, then, and before then, we were in boarding school. He was at Andover. He was a little older than I was, just the perfect age for a first boyfriend. And he lived 2 houses away.
Perfect location, too.
Yes. And at that time, I thought that, and he had a car with a rumble seat, believe it or not. Not that we were that old for rumble seat.
Just the car,
days,
not
he
you.
He was 16, and he got this very old car, you know, for his first little jalopy in the country, and it had a rumble seat.
Does your interest in the theater relate to your interest in the audience versus film?
Yes, I think I am interested both as an actress and as a person in dealing with groups of people, you know, and making them laugh, making them cry, involving them, you know, their passions. That's probably why I started out to be a politician. I'm more interested in groups of people than anything else, and I'm only interested in the theater insofar as it can reach people in the way I want to.
How would you like to reach us in a musical again?
I would like to do music. I love it. I love to do music. But I love the Brecht Weill music.
And Three Penny Opera was one of the mainstays of your early career. Weren't you in and out of that?
Yeah. I've played Mrs. Peachum in that and also Jenny. And I like that a lot. That kind of material. Act singing is what I like to do, not singing.
Act singing? What do you mean? Act
through music. I don't like to sing through music, but singing, acting. Singspiel, I guess it's called in German. It's what Brecht and Weill wrote. You know, music for actors to sing.
It's all the time said that the American theater is in terrible shape. I think the cliche goes that the theater is in a sad decline. One hears that, I guess, every season. I'm under the impression that institutional theater has never flourished quite the way it is right now. Is that true?
I think the theater is in better shape than it has been since I was alive. Now, maybe greater things were done in New York, which means for smaller numbers. But when I grew up, if you wanted to be an actress, if you had any dream of it, you had to go to New York. I mean, there just was no professional theater. No.
Is the theater no longer confined and defined as Broadway?
No, it's not in New York hardly at all. It's all over the country. Now, there are wonderful regional theaters doing better material than is done in New York, and it's clear that Broadway is a place for a mass audience, not for your true theater goer.
But I'm also under the impression that no matter how the regional theater in Minneapolis or Washington or Texas flourishes, no matter where something emanates from or originates from, ultimately, one wants to bring it to Broadway, that still is the test of something. Does that still apply?
I don't think, no, Broadway isn't the test of something. New York is the test of something, because there are such literate audiences here. There are one or two other places maybe where you would have the same kind of keen audience.
Where would that
potential
be, other than
London?
London?
I'm thinking of a place like Woodstock, which may sound silly to you, but
it may be a New York audience.
Really.
No.
It's a New York audience, and it's also a European audience, where they have a theatrical tradition. And when you play in Woodstock, they know what you're doing. I mean, so often I've had the experiences of audiences not comprehending what you're doing, particularly if you deal with very good texts. But if you work off Broadway, or if you work, for instance, in Woodstock, when we played Three Penny Opera there, and the response was absolutely astounding to the really good theatrical work, which would get lost, you know, when it was played in other places and for an audience that just came to see a musical. For instance, the Lincoln Center version of Threepenny Opera bears very little resemblance to Threepenny Opera. And the people go and they don't respond at all, either pro or negatively, to the music or the lyrics or what is essentially in that piece. You know, they're clearly
You're talking about
not...
the revisionist version
Yeah.
of Threepenny Opera, and it doesn't please you either, I guess.
Well, what pleases me least is that the audience is not a theater audience.
How do you sense
know?
that on stage? By reactions?
Oh, yeah. You do something
really
that
get
you
a whole-
know is just wonderful. And I'm not speaking about that it's arguable, but something that you know from having worked on the text, that you know is true to the material and is exactly what the actor should bring, you know. And every once in a while you do something like that. And if you have a theatrical audience, they will join with you in the experience. And if you don't, it just goes by, and you and maybe, you know, your fellow actors or 3 or 4 people will say, oh, that moment. You know, but the general audience will not respond as a group.
Is it that literate audience that keeps you in New York? Why do you live here, for example, versus Hollywood or any other number of places that you could be in?
New York is, Lee Strasberg said it to the mayor, you know, and I've never said it quite that strongly, but he said this is, after all, the greatest city in the world. And, you know, sometimes we sheepishly say, well, there's London and Paris. But he's no doubt right. I mean, New York is the greatest city in the history of the world, I think he put it. And it's absolutely true, it is.
I'm afraid I have to join you in that self-congratulation.
Good!
I think by the same token, for a New Englander, I've prevailed upon you to read from some works, and you've brought with you, I think, a poem of Robert Frost that is reminiscent of your New England girlhood.
Oh, yes.
And I guess something that may be reminiscent of many of the rest of our girlhoods, and that is, you recently appeared in a play about Colette, a collage about her life, excerpts from her writings, and you're good enough to agree to read from that, and I think we'd all enjoy that.
Good. I brought it because you had mentioned to me, was there something in it about I am the daughter of a woman who? And I couldn't remember. It was all just a part of the whole characterization I did. Then I went back and looked it up and found, do I have time to do the whole little section?
I think so, and I hope you will.
There's a section in the play where Colette talks to the audience about having her child. She had one, and then about being her mother's daughter. And I don't remember it anymore, even though I played it for several weeks. So I have to do it with the script. It is neither wise nor good to start a child with too much thought. During the first 3 months, I told almost no one of my condition, but soon the half-hidden and involuntary smile of pregnant woman showed even through my makeup as the optimistic owl. Colette, you see, spent a good part of her life after she started writing. When she broke up with her husband, she then went on the stage and did pantomimes in France. She has such a strange mind that I can't really act so many of the changes in her writings. These are all her writings, not her actual expressions. But they're, to me, very, very strange. Insidiously, unhurriedly, the beatitude of pregnant females spread through me. This purring contentment, this euphoria submerged everything, and over me reigned the sweet animal innocence and unconcern arising from my added weight and the muffled appeals of the new life being formed within me. When I had almost reached my time, I looked like a rat dragging a stolen egg. My long festival came to an end on a cloudless day in July. What followed was the contemplation of a new person who had appeared in the house without coming from the outside. My daughter. Did I bring sufficient love to my contemplation? I dare not state it with certainty, but I did have the habit, and still have, of marveling. This is a letter from her mother. When her mother was invited by her second husband to come and visit them for a week. And she wrote back, "Sir, you asked me to come and spend a week with you, which means I would be near my daughter, whom I adore. You who live with her know how rarely I see her, how much her presence delights me, and I'm touched that you should ask me to come and visit. All the same, I'm not coming for the time being, at any rate. The reason is that my pink cactus is probably going to flower. It's a very rare plant I've been given, and I'm told that in our climate it flowers only once every 4 years. Now I'm already a very old woman, and if I went away when my pink cactus is about to flower, I'm certain I shouldn't see it flower again. So I beg you, sir, accept my sincere thanks, my regrets, together with my kind regards." And that little piece was done by Mildred Dunnick as the mother writing the letter. And then Colette says, "This note, signed Sidonie Colette, was written by my mother to my second husband. A year later she died at the age of 77. Whenever I feel myself inferior to everything about me, threatened by my own mediocrity, frightened by the discovery that a muscle is losing its strength, a desire its power, or a pain the keen edge of its bite, I can still hold up my head and say to myself, I am the daughter of a woman who in a mean, close-fisted, confined little place opened her village home to stray cats, tramps, and pregnant servant girls. Let me not forget that I am the daughter of a woman who bent her head between the blades of a cactus, her wrinkled face full of ecstasy over the promise of a flower, a woman who herself never ceased to flower untiringly during 3/4 of a century. I want to tell everything I know, all my thoughts, all my surmises, everything that enchants or hurts or astounds me."
Thank you, Estelle Parsons, rare actress, remarkable woman. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for joining us, audience. I'm Barbara Lee Diamonstein in About the Arts.